You feel bad about it, Mr. Clanton asked me. He meant that we had to cut up the getaway car and get rid of all the pieces. No, sir, I told him. That car was a horse for you boys, Mr. Clanton said. I wanted to explain to him how I didn't care about cars, just about driving. But I thought that would sound dumb, so I just shook my head like I was sad. That was what Mr. Clanton expected of me, I think. Virgil showed me how to bury money in mason jars like they use for canning. Money's only paper. If you don't seal it up real tight, it could rot on you, especially if you left it a long time. We couldn't spend most of the money right away, Tim said. The men who were in that poker game had people all over the place. If we started throwing money around, word would get back to them. I asked Tim if he'd hide my share for me. I'll hide half of it for you, Eddie, he said. The other half you have to hide for yourself. How come? You can never have all your money in one place. What if I had to come back for my own money? In a hurry, you understand? I might not have time to cover my tracks. Anyone coming hot on my heels would find your share, too. Well, if that happened, you could just take my share with you. Eddie, you can't always get away. Not every time. If I got caught, all the money would be gone. Yours, too, you understand? I guess I do. But I could always... Half, Tim said. No more. Virgil was a real good cook. His barbecue, particularly. He made his own pit on the side of the house, out of some special bricks that came from a famous barbecue oven in Kansas City. Virgil said after a lot of years, the bricks get to hold a flavor, and whatever you cook in them gets some of that flavor too. I was never sure when Virgil was having fun with me when he told me things, but his barbecue was good enough that he could have opened a restaurant. Tim was always after him to do just that. He said we all had to have regular, legitimate businesses to be in because stick-up men never die of old age, and we couldn't keep on the way we were forever. Virgil said we were all going to do it someday. We'd have a big barbecue joint. Virgil would be the cook and Tim would be the manager. And we'll have a beautiful little garage right next to it, Tim said. Maybe a body shop or a place for motors. Right, Eddie? Sure, I said, but I was really wishing they'd asked me to work in the restaurant. We were all out by the barbecue pit one afternoon. Virgil had been doing something different with the meat all day. He had different kinds, not just pork like you see in some places. And he was just starting to put it on the fire. A car pulled up. An old one is all I remember about it. A woman got out of the front seat. She was kind of heavy with long, straight brown hair. Brenda, Tim said to Virgil. The woman walked over to where we were standing. I got to talk to you, she said to Tim. Tim looked over at Virgil. Then he moved his head to the side a little bit so you could tell he was listening. Wallace, the woman said. I'm not doing this again to Brent, Tim told her. That's your man. That's your choice. You think I forgot what happened before? But this is what, Brenda? This is different? How many times you come around here looking for money because Wallace beat your ass and took your check? But that wasn't enough for you, right? You had to wait till I'm off somewhere and sneak yourself up here. Virgil, he takes one look at your face all bashed up, and what does he do? I didn't mean for him to. You're a no good lying bitch, Brenda said. His voice was as calm as if he was asking you if you wanted a cigarette. You think because we're kin, you get to play us over and over again, don't you? Tim, I swear. Don't fucking swear, Sim said. It wasn't the judge who sent my brother over that time, Brenda. It was you. I'm sorry. You know I never would. Never would what, Virgil said. His voice was soft and quiet, just like Tim's. Never would get me some county time for whipping that piece of shit Wallace? Yeah, you do that. You did that. But you know what, Brenda? That's not why I'm done with you, even if you are Mom's baby sister. I didn't mind doing the time. I thought it was worth it. I figured that was it for Wallace. He'd be afraid to show his face around you. And then what happens? Virgil, you take up with him again, Virgil said, still quiet. I'm on a fucking road, gang, and Wallace is back with his favorite piece of ass. There's nothing for you here, Brenda, Tim said. We never thought we'd see you again. That's the way we wanted it. You may be a stupid slut, but you're not that stupid. You didn't know how we felt about you. If Mom was alive, she'd spit on you for what you did to Virgil. So don't come around using her name like you did before. It's not for me, the woman said. Her face was all twisted up like she was going to cry, but she didn't. It's about Janine. I don't know any Janine, Tim said. She's Wanda and Roy's girl. You know, Wanda was killed by that drunk driver year before last, and then Roy took with the cancer. He's been in the hospital just waiting to die. So I took Janine to live with me, since I'm a blood relative and all. Yeah, you're a good-hearted woman, all right, Tim said. How big a check's the government giving you for her? That isn't why I did it. If I didn't come through, Janine would have gone to a foster home, and you know what they're like. Get to it, Brenda, Virgil told her. I got meat waiting for me that's more important than you are. Who's this? Brenda said, looking at me for the first time. None of your business, Tim told her. Nothing around here is any of your business. This is a man we trust. You don't want to talk in front of him, tell your story walking. She's in the car, Brenda said. Who? Janine. I had to bring her with me. She's only 12. I couldn't leave her in the house alone. Brenda. Tim didn't sound so patient anymore. Wallace has been messing with her, she said. I just found out, I swear. I don't know what to do. She's scared of him. I can't go to the police. Just stay here, Brenda, Tim said, cutting her off. Stay here and don't say a fucking word. Nobody's listening to you anyway. Tim walked down to where Brenda's car was sitting. I saw him tap on the window. In a minute or so, the window came down. I could see someone was in there, but I couldn't make out anything about them. I'm sorry, Brenda said to Virgil. He acted like she wasn't there. Tim opened the car door. A little girl got out. All I could see is that she was real skinny with light brown hair, wearing a big yellow T-shirt that covered her all the way down to her knees. She walked down the path with Tim until I couldn't see them anymore. They were gone a good while. Brenda kept trying to say something to Virgil, but he never spoke to her. Then he turned to me. Eddie, he said, would you do me a favor? Sure. Go in the house and get my pistol. Which one? Any of them will do, Virgil told me. Virgil, Brenda said. By the time I got back with Virgil's pistol, Tim and the little girl were coming up the path. Tim opened the door to the car and the little girl got in. Tim held out his hand and she grabbed it for a second. Then Tim came back up the rise towards us. You filthy whore, Tim said to Brenda. His voice was so soft I almost couldn't hear it. You didn't just find out about Wallace fucking that little girl. You also found out she was pregnant, huh? So now you're worried about your own ass. Like always. She's lying, Tim. Lying about what? Lying about when she came to you and told you Wallace was grabbing her and you slapped her face and told her Wallace was the man of the house? Lying about when Wallace whipped her with his belt till she was bloody and you didn't do nothing? Lying about the time you woke up in the night and found Wallace in her bed? Tim moved closer to Brenda. She took a step back. Tell me, Brenda, he said, I really want to know. I swear I told you about swearing about, Brenda. I told you about that. Remember before when I said if Mom was alive, she'd spit on you? If Mom knew what you did to that little girl, she'd fucking kill you, sister or no. What am I going to do? You, huh? What you're going to do, you're going to drive Janine down to the welfare and tell him the truth. The truth, you dirty bitch. If I find out you protected Wallace, it's you I'll come looking for, you understand? But if Janine tells, Wallace will... Here, Tim said, handing her some bills. You don't go back home, understand? You go to a motel. There's enough there for a couple of weeks, food and everything. It may take a few days for the law to pick Wallace up, but he's not making bail once they do, and then you can go back home. But a motel's no place for a... Janine's not going to be with you, Brenda. You leave her with the welfare. But she'll end up in... Wherever she ends up, it'll be better than being with you. Brenda started crying. You don't understand, Tim. You're not a woman. Neither are you, Tim said. We were at the kitchen table later that night. Tim told me, we've got a job, Eddie. Okay, I said. Thing is, there's no shares this time. There won't be any money. So we'll just pay you cash like we hired you. Fair enough? Sure, I said. I got up and walked outside. Quick, before anything showed on my face. I was out there a long time. I never felt so sad in my whole life. I heard them come up behind me, but I didn't turn around. You want some sausage? Virgil said. He knows it's my favorite. No, thanks. I don't blame him, Tim said. Who'd want to eat a meal with a pair of assholes like us? I didn't say anything. I knew my voice would shake if I did. Both of them came around so they were facing me. We apologize, Eddie, Virgil said. We never meant to insult you. It's okay, I said. No, it isn't, Virgil said. We never should have offered you money. We should have just asked if you'd drive us. I didn't want to talk. I felt like crying, only I was too sad. No, that's not right, Tim said. Eddie, we shouldn't have asked you at all. I looked in his eyes then. You're with us, Tim said. We're with you. Blood is bullshit. Brenda's not our kin, Eddie. You are. Right then was the best moment I ever spent on Earth. All right. Burke was a deliberately created name. It comes from, who's heard of the serial killers Burke and Hare? Not many, right? Okay, here's what these guys did. And this is a long, long time ago. They were professional grave robbers. Now you're saying, who can make a living robbing graves? Think pre-refrigeration and the fact that medical schools can't exist without cadavers. So these guys robbed graves. They were not highly sophisticated criminals. So they emptied the graveyard, and they were then unemployed. They were not overburdened with morals, so they opened a hotel. Right, exactly right. You walked in the front door, you got carried out the back. But because you cannot bring a cadaver to a medical school with a knife sticking out of its chest, they perfected the technique that Burke became known for, which was to kill without leaving marks. If you pick up one of these big fancy dictionaries like the Oxford English Dictionary, if you look up the term Burke, way down on the list of definitions is to kill without leaving traces. So, since I intended the books as Trojan horses, Burke was the name I picked for the character. That's where it came from. But the material itself, no, I mean, I didn't have to make it up. Although the book reviewing community has been consistent in deciding that these are all sick, horrible fantasies, then a few years later, they wake up, but by then I'm on to a different book. So I wrote about predatory pedophiles, modem trafficking, and kiddie porn. Big deal. Who hasn't written about that, right? Except I wrote about it 15 years ago. And the reaction from the critical community was, only a sick mind could fantasize. What, of course, we're seeing is actual traffic. So that's been the history of the books. It hasn't required any imagination whatsoever, unfortunately so. I thought I was done with the first book. You don't understand. The reason my first book is so bad is because I thought it was a one-round fight. I just threw every punch I had. The book is about a third longer than it needs to be. Only a narcissist, and actually a terminal narcissist, says, oh, I'm going to write a 15-book series. Well, who does that? So all that happened is the economics drive the reality. There's an increasing demand for each book, so they live. The demand stops, they're done. I have, but you see, the problem is it's a first-person narrative. Right. It's a first-person narrative, and that's what sticks me. I can't go back into somebody else's life, which is in effect what the narrator would be doing. All you can do is listen. So what you know about Max's past, you know from what he, not said, but signed, okay? And that's the only way you're going to know anybody's past, through dialogue. I'm not able to assume one of those persona and go back. You only know what's shared with you. Wesley and Burke shared a lot. I mean, because they came up together. He didn't know these other people when he was a kid. He did know Wesley when he was a kid. So there's more information available about Wesley. But to assume the persona, no. This is people's lives. I mean, that's the way it happens for some people. I don't think there's anything unique about it. And I don't think there's anything in his character that says he can't bond with somebody. But, you know, people die on him. I mean, relationships have ended. Somebody dies. You can't. I think it's a kind of lifestyle where you don't tend to have those kind of relationships that go the distance. But I don't think it's any particular comment on the women that are involved. Most of the women with any sort of intelligence left, right, and pursued their own life. Some died. Nobody's created as anything. Burke's the only created character. And Burke is transparent. That's why there's no physical description of him. He's simply your eyes and your ears into that world. The other people are people I know, and I've commingled bits and pieces because, you know, they're practicing criminals and they're not all dead. But not created as any alter ego, and I don't actually feel that Max is. I wrote false allegations because it was the story that I wanted to tell, but I stepped over the line by, instead of having but instead of disguising the characters, they're actual people that you could meet. You know, when you have for want of a better term, a figure of science, and it's science that I want you to be able to access, so I use his real name. But that was the departure. No. That's a commingling of two bad rumors. I did write a Batman book, okay, which is the use of a licensed character. They came to me and said I could use their character for my purposes. So I did, in fact, write that book. However, the Batman book that was actually released is a horribly euphemized version of what I wrote. Unlike with Knopf, my regular publisher, where I get to control what comes out, this is a licensed character. So there's something called a Bat Bible. This Bible, yes, you're looking at me, sir, as if I'm nuts, but I am not. In fact, this controls what Batman can do and can't do. So I wrote this book, and I turned it in. And they said, this won't do. And I said, why? And they said, okay, first of all, Batman can't kill anybody. All right. And Batman can't have sex. Okay, that's it for my literary repertoire. You know, I mean, there's nothing more. I asked them if I could sort of make a pitch to them to explain why I should be allowed to do this. So I got like this bat jury, you know. But it wasn't it wasn't a group like you folks who might be objective. These were people who, Batman's real to them, you know. So I said, okay, let's just review where we are, right? Batman is actually Bruce Wayne. They go, yes, good, you got that. I said, okay. He's like the best looking guy in the whole city. I said, yes. He's suave, he's sophisticated, he's charming, he's educated, and he's fabulously wealthy, right? They go, yes. He said, and he lives in, by far, the best house in the whole place. He said, no question. Certainly got the coolest car. No argument. I said, okay, this guy can't have sex. They said, no. And I said, wouldn't that make you want to kill somebody? And instead of laughing, they're looking at me like, you heretic, you know. So, yes, there was a Batman book. No, there was no screen. I guarantee you this is one book that will never reach the screen. I have written screenplays, but not Batman. The screenplays that I wrote?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they were total disasters. What happened was everything I write gets bought. They always buy the stuff. And I can show you the sequence so you'll see how deeply engaged they are. When The Getaway Man came out, the New York Times wrote a really nice review of it. Within hours, people called the office and made offers for the rights. And this is the way they do it. They say, we want to make an offer for The Getaway Man, and would you send us a copy? So you understand they're not deeply engaged in the material, right? I sold them one book, and they paid a really stupid amount of money. And they were so sure it was going to happen that they hired the director, which means they pay him win or lose. And they formed a production company, and they scouted locations. And now they've got massive amounts of money in this book. Screenplay came in, it was terrible. At least according to the director, I didn't read it. Now they're in a panic because the clock is running, sand's coming out of the hourglass. They have all this money on the line. So they hired two different screenplayers, guys, simultaneously, figuring one of them would come up a winner. Neither did. Now they're so desperate, they're so terrorized that they said, did I want to write it? I said, all right, sure, you know. So I took a little time off, and I do mean a little time, and I wrote it. I turned it in on time. This stamped me as a non-professional right away, so they knew. They reviewed it, then they called me into this meeting. And in the meeting, they have like this huge horseshoe-shaped table, and there's a guy sitting in the middle, and you know he looks at this kind of stuff. Everybody communicates non-verbally. They're all going. So I said, what? He said, look, everybody read your screenplay. I don't know how to tell you this, but it's exactly like your book. So that was it. That was the worst thing apparently you could do with a screenplay, and it didn't happen. They didn't learn from this. They continued to option everything, and they continued never to make anything. So my best guess is never, with anything. This particular book, this one was Flood. I mean, that's how far back it goes. So, but they've done it serially since then. And I imagine they'll always do it. You know what? I never participate in those discussions because they offend me. That's what they do. They sit you down and they say, who do you see playing this? I always tell them the same thing. Do you guys realize there's more than 9 actors in the world? do, do you actually realize that there's working actors who are better than the people you talked about? Do you get the concept that there's musicians who never actually cut a record who are better than the people who did? Do you accept the idea that there's writers who haven't been published who are better than what you're reading? And the answer is no, they don't accept that. So I said the only way I'd want to do it is fair fight. Give every actor in the world that wants to reach for the part the pages. Let them come in, let everybody get 5 minutes in front of a camera, record it all, pick a winner. They thought this was worse than the Batman people felt about writing the Batman book. So, no, I don't participate because I think it's not just morally wrong, but stupid. It's like as if, let's say you were a guy and you wanted to have a date, right? Okay? And someone said, you can pick between these 5 girls or these 5 million girls. What would you do? They pick the 5 girls. Every single time. It's inevitable that they're not going to pick winners. So, and I wouldn't care if they miscast it, wouldn't matter to me. You know, once you sign with these people, the only thing I have in my contracts that's, well, I don't think it's unique anymore. It was at the time. I hope it's not unique now. I've got a Victor Salva clause in my contract. You're all looking at me blank, right? Okay, here's Victor Salva. Victor Salva is a predatory pedophile. He's a child molester. He's also a movie director. And he molested children on the set of one of his movies. He went to prison. When he got out of prison, he got a job directing a Disney movie. In the middle of the production, when they've already got all the money invested, a young man came forward. Now he's still only like 21. And he said, this guy did these horrible things to me. And it's not a question of a false allegation. I don't want to hear that crap. The guy went to prison for it. He pleaded guilty. How could you be making a Disney movie? Disney at that moment developed a belief in rehabilitation that would stun you. If you want to see similar parallels, look at any major basketball power when one of its stars gets arrested for domestic violence. They believe that people can be cured. You know, he has an hour worth of anger management. It was the same, Victor Salva paid his dues. So what I have in the movie contracts is nobody who's been convicted of a crime against a child can work in any capacity on the movies. But in terms of creative control, that's a total myth. I mean, I don't know any writer in the history of the world that ever had that. And I don't have it. So they could do whatever they want. But all they do now is they pay and don't do anything. I mean, it's a pretty good deal when you think about it. I haven't seen one. I'm not a movie guy. If it wasn't for airplanes, I don't think I would see movies. I kind of hate so-called crime movies because they really depict violence in such a way that is absurd. When I ran the prison, we had a lot of guys in there that committed pretty horrific physical acts. Here's one of the exercises we did with them. We gave them 3 identical white balls. Okay? And we'd say, pick one. They'd pick it, and we'd say, hit it. One was the consistency like rubber, one was hard like concrete, and one was eggshell. After they all went through the exercise with different results, what we said is, listen to me. That's human skulls. You hit somebody in the head with a tire iron, one guy turns around and goes, huh? One guy gets knocked out, which is what you all fantasize happens from the movies, and one guy dies. And some of you are actually here because you believed you could take a blunt object, hit a human being in the head, and knock him unconscious. I mean, I sort of hate the way movies depict violence. Do you ever actually, I don't want to inquire into anybody's personal life. Has anybody ever been around when guns have been fired? It's not a rush, is it? Doesn't excite you, does it? No. First of all, you're deaf.
It's terrifying.
When there's gunfire going around, the first thing that happens is you go deaf. The idea that people can count shots. I met so many kids who think guns are Bic lighters. You know, throw them away. I mean, even reloading them is beyond their capacity. I really don't like crime movies. I don't get them. They don't resonate at all with me. They kind of turn me off. Virtually everything about the way it's depicted is wrong. And I don't care about its accuracy. I care about its effect. There's all kinds of people walking around that believe you can shoot somebody several times and they'll be fine. People think you can crash cars into walls and walk away looking for clues. The person who needs to look for clues, obviously, is the guy who wrote this. Not for me. Not for me. But I accept, what Hollywood said to me, because originally I didn't want to do this, and what they said to me, sadly, was true. More people will see the worst flop in the history of movies than will read the biggest bestseller in the history of books. And so if you're all about this message that you say you are, even if 0.1% of everybody who sees a crappy movie gets a little piece of it, you're ahead. And it actually didn't make sense to me. But no one's going to give me, $50 million and say, go direct a movie. Especially because it's their prevalent belief that nobody would want to watch such a movie. Oh, God, no. I write music, and do you know who Sun Seals is? Okay, well, I wrote a couple of songs on his last CD. And Doc Pomus, does anybody know? Does anybody not know who Doc Pomus is? How about if I say something like Save the Last Dance for Me? Would that? Doc Pomus is one of America's great songwriters, ever. A Teenager in Love. He wrote so many doo-wop classics from the 60s. He was my great and good friend, and he's gone now. But he's the guy that taught me, the little I know about songwriting. But play something, never. Never. You've heard the voice that you hear now would be my singing voice. Can you imagine that? Mostly I read nonfiction because it's required for what I do. But I like a lot of writers that, I don't know, I suspect I'm going to say their names and not a lot of hands are going to be raised. Although I'm hoping, with the first one, Joe Lansdale, there'll be, okay, some, but not enough. He's a wonderful writer. Chet Williamson? No, right? James Colbert? Okay, fine. I like Alice Hoffman. I'm crazy about Martha Grimes. I like Jonathan Kellerman's stuff. Let's see. Well, God help me, I even like Kiki Freeman's stuff, But I like Paul Kane very much. Not James M. Cain, Paul Kane. I like the hell out. I don't like Jim Thompson. I'm crazy about David Goodis, Harry Whittington. But you notice you're not all leaping with recognition, spinning in your eyes. Sorry. That's the same limitations that I'm always talking about with movies. People know, I've seen people go into bookstores and ask what's on the bestseller list like they were in a butcher shop and saying, what's good today? But somebody else is making up their mind for them. And if I had my wish, it would be, you were talking about blues. Well, in blues clubs, and I don't mean, House of Blues. I mean bars. If you feel up to it some Tuesday night, you can get up there on a stage. And you can play for as long as the audience will let you. And some great, great musicians started that way. There's no way to do that with writing, and there should be. If it was up to me, everybody who wanted to write a book would get 1,000 words that they could excerpt from the book that they wrote. Stick it up on some giant website, sort it by genre if that's what you want, and let you go sample it. See? And then if you found what you liked, go with it instead of having someone tell you what they like, which is all book reviewing is. And book reviewing is useless. It's absolutely useless as a barometer. I've written books where one reviewer says, I'm the new Dickens, and another reviewer, same day, different paper, says I'm the king of vigilante slasher porn. So it depends on which one you read, right? And that's just plain silly. The West Side Highway is gone. There's been structural changes. I don't think the city's changed anywhere near as much as the commentators think. No, it's in Portland, they think since 9/11 we're a different city. They don't know. I don't see that. There's people, and listen, I don't mean to offend anybody, but there's people in other cities who think that we all worship Giuliani. Well, that wasn't my problem, So I think the city has changed the way it always changes. The city's never been static, but I don't think it's affected what I'm doing except that I'm trying to accurately reflect it. But I don't see the sea change that distant observers see. The way the clients come to me is very simple. New York has, and I know you're going to find this unbelievable, but the most advanced legal system ever for representing children in abuse and neglect cases. Here's the way the system works. A person's accused of abusing or neglecting their child. They, of course, will get lawyers. If they can't afford lawyers, lawyers will be provided for them. The government prefers the case. The government, of course, has lawyers. In the New York system, the child also gets a lawyer, an independent lawyer, not from the government, okay, not retained by the parents. That person is called a law guardian. They're appointed off a rotating panel of people who are qualified to be on the panel. That's the way you get abuse and neglect cases. But I also get cases where kids are accused of crimes. Some of those are court appointed, some of those I've been retained by extraordinarily wealthy people whose kids put themselves in these situations. I also sometimes represent, you ever see two elephants fight? Okay, think about the grass beneath them. That's the kid in a divorce case or a custody case. So I represent kids in those cases. I represent kids in adoptions. I also represent children who've been abused by third parties. In other words, not by the parents, retained by the parents because it was a daycare center or a scout leader or a coach. So those are all the different ways that I end up with clients. When I went to law school and said that's what I intended to do, it was like a great joke to all the sociopathic little yuppies because they couldn't believe you could make a living at it. And they were pretty much right, actually. So when I began, before the books hit, and I don't simply need to work for a living, I could just represent kids. Before that, I did half-time criminal defense and half-time representing kids. And the criminal defense practice was restricted. I only did like shooting, stomping, stabbing. I didn't do narcotics and I didn't do sex. But I did violence all the time. And made a good living at that, and that financed representing kids. In New York now, in the city, most of the law guardian work's done now by an agency, by a private agency that's got a contract with the city. But so I did cases in Westchester, any place that I could find them, as long as it was New York. In Florida, if you are, say, an incest victim, your parents, and I put the words in quotes, they'll get lawyers. Guess what you get? You get a warm, caring volunteer, and I don't mean a volunteer lawyer. I mean some amateur who's just a nice person who likes kids. They get to represent you. They can't file motions, they can't cross-examine witnesses, they can't do any discovery, they can't do investigations. But they can stand up in court and tell the judge what they think would be best for you. It's a horrible system. When I was in Florida and we had a debate about it, which was kind of a bloodbath, the only way they could defend this system is saying it's cost-effective. So, well, it doesn't cost us anything to do this because all the representation of volunteers. Doesn't cost anything. You want to see a high-stakes trial. It's not a death penalty trial. It's a trial where if you lose, the victim goes home with the perpetrator. Now, if you don't think you pay the price for that 10 years down the road, you're plain stupid. Criminal justice simply pays what they saved at the other end. Mental health system pays what they saved at the other end. But many, many, many states, children are not represented in the most vital case they're ever going to be in. No, it didn't. It had a great media impact, but if I say, and I say this to journalists all the time when they talk about little Lisa, I say, name 2 other kids that died that year, and they can't. I mean, that was like the perfect mediagenic case because you had very interesting defendants, and you had a white child, and it had all the elements that they liked. But did it have a sea change effect on Child Protective Services? No. Did it galvanize the apportionment of funding? No. Did it raise standards of training? The agency, the Child Protective Agency in New York, has changed its name as many times as a divorcee. I mean, it used to be called the Bureau of Child Welfare, right? It's changed its name half a dozen times since then. But in terms of actually putting the money that's necessary to train people properly, to supervise them properly, to staff properly, that hasn't been done. The Lisa Steinberg case brought media attention to, white, middle class, or even upper class educated people also torture their kids. But in terms of changing government policy, didn't do it. And I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum, right? Who recognizes this statement? Leave no child behind, right? Okay, and how about it takes a village? It's exactly the same statement. People can run for office in America, and they do, without ever addressing themselves to child protection, right? You can't run for president unless you say where you stand on abortion, right? On the environment, on gun control, on capital punishment. There are issues you have to speak to. All you have to say is, I love children, and I respect the American family, and you're done. There'll be no more questions from journalism. So, no, I don't think that the Lisa Steinberg case, or any case that I can think of, has ever done anything more than be a blip. Every time a kid is kidnapped, there's a lot of media attention. And yet the number of kids who are actually hurt by strangers compared to the number of kids hurt by their own or within their circle of trust, which includes teachers and coaches and religious figures, it's like this to this. But no, you're not going to get too many movies of the week about the homegrown stuff. Let me tell you what the law is in your state. And I'm going to bet that none of you even know this. And that when you hear it, you're going to go, how could this be? And I'm not talking about some fantasy. This is the law in New York. If a human being, you notice I'm not saying a man or a woman, right? A human being sexually assaults a 9-year-old who lives down the block. That's a B felony. And we do our felonies up, right? So it's one below the highest felony. Maximum of 25 years in prison if you're convicted. Fair enough, right? If that same human being did the exact same acts to a child that exact same age on the same day, but it was his or her own child, the prosecutor can, in his or her sole discretion, charge incest. What's incest? Well, it's not a B felony. It's not a C felony. It's not even a D felony. It's an E felony. What does that mean? It means upon conviction, you're automatically eligible for probation. So if you grow your own victim under our laws, if you get the right prosecutor, you just walk away, giggling. That's the law. That's not my fantasy. That's not Law and Order Special Victims. That's the law. That's the law that's on the books right now, as we sit here today. So how much do you think changed? You see? Because Lisa Steinberg was an intrafamilial attack. Didn't change anything. You know what hasn't changed anything? Why do you think it is? Why do you think the child protective issues are not like front and center? That's right. Children don't vote, but you know what? Guns vote, and they have a real impact on society, don't they? Guns have a voice, don't they? No politician's going to not take a position about guns. The difference is there's no single issue, narrow focus, one God before it constituency for kids that attaches its vote to child protective issues the way it attaches its vote to abortion or gun control or the environment. There are people telling politicians every day, I don't care where you stand on any other issue but mine. And my vote and the vote of my friends and my political contributions and my loyalty depends on that one vote. Nobody has ever said that concerning children. There's never been a political action committee about child protection, like there is for whales. If you were walking in Central Park, not now, but in the spring, and you saw two adult males, looked exactly alike, they could be twins. Each one had a stick. One was beating a dog, and one was beating a kid. Which one do you think would get the quickest intervention from the most people? It is the dog. I mean, whether you like it or not, it is the dog. Politicians are like, you remember high school biology, amoeba? You put a light here and the amoeba go over here, right? You put the light over here, you can move them over here. They don't have, I'm not joking, they have no personal feelings. Let me prove it to you. See how good students of history you are. Remember George Wallace? Remember him? Okay. Do you know that the first time he ran for office, he ran as the NAACP candidate? Did you know that? Please look it up if you doubt what I'm saying. He ran, he lost, and he said, oh, I get it, and he put on a robe and a sheet and a hood, and he was successful. Do I know that George Wallace is, a miserable maggot? Certainly. But do I know that he's a racist? I don't know that. I don't know that. He was going to go wherever the light drove him. Don't you think politicians drive to the State House drunk and then pass legislation that Mothers Against Drunk Driving advocated? Because it's a deliverable block of votes. And there's never been one. There's never been one for children. I tried this once. I gave a speech in Oakland. It's a huge room full of people. And the price of admission was, it wasn't said so on the ticket, but the price of admission really was I'm committed to child protection. That's my issue. So I constructed this perfect political candidate for child protective issues. And I listed all the things this candidate was going to do if elected. I said, how many would vote for him? Every hand went up. I said, okay, let me flesh him out a little bit, all right? He's gay. Some of the hands went down. I said, okay, wait, it's not gay. He's heterosexual. In fact, he's so heterosexual that in addition to his wife, he has a couple of girlfriends. Some of the hands went down. I said he's a Roman Catholic. Some of the hands went down. I said he's a Jew. Some of the hands went down. I said he's totally in favor of affirmative action. Some of the hands went down. I said he's a racist. Some of the hands went down. You know the end of the story. When I was done, there wasn't one hand standing because everybody had issues that no matter what they said, whatever their rhetoric was more important to them than what they said was most important, which was protecting children. That's been the history of American politics. I'll prove it to you again. When's the last time women voted in America as a bloc? Clearly not. Clearly not. Ask Phyllis Schlafly. Clearly not. It would have passed if they had. No? Beg pardon? Nope. Although more women voted for him than not. But I mean as a bloc. I mean as a bloc that was so strong that it terrorized Congress into passing legislation that was cataclysmic. That's it. That's the one. The child labor laws that you all take for granted were not part of American history. Our history was children were owned property and you could chain them to a workbench legally. Women got the vote, and the next thing you know, like by magic, we had child labor laws. Because it was the one issue that women in this country seemed totally united on. There was no constituency against it. But women haven't voted as a bloc since. I mean, you don't believe women are united about the issue of abortion, right? I mean, you can't believe that. Completely split. Bloc voting's got a long history in America, but it's been a long time since there's been a real bloc. There's pockets. So you have the gun people, or you have the anti-abortion people, or you have the environmental people. I'll tell you something else. George Bush may be nuts enough to start a war, but he's not crazy enough to cut Social Security. He wouldn't dare. They would come for him. They might come in walkers, but they would come for him, and they would take him out. He would have no chance. You don't mess with the AARP. And they don't have a whole lot of issues. You know, my dad was telling, my dad's like a rabid member. He called me up one time, he says, you know what these sons of bitches are trying to pass in the legislature? I said, what now, Pop? You know, he says, they want everybody over 80 to be tested for a driver's license. It's those miserable fascists, you know. I said, you know, Pop, it's a public safety issue. He says, what, you're an ageist. He's got it all down, see? And his group, the AARP, they're united. They're not going for this crap about testing people just because they're like 106. They should be allowed to drive. So they have no other, and you see, guess what? Politicians don't want to mess with them. They don't want to mess with them because it's the one thing. It's not the ethics of the issue. It's not the morality of it. It's the deliverable block of votes. When children get that, then you see change. Not before. Not before. If any of you are interested in actually pursuing this, I'm proud to tell you that there now is, for the first time ever, an actual political action committee, a membership organization, strictly and solely on child protection. People as fanatical about child protection as other people are about stopping women from having abortions or owning guns. And you can look it up very simple. It's got the simplest URL in the world, protect.org. Look it up, see for yourself, make a decision. But it's a membership organization, it's not a website. So clicking on isn't going to do crap. There's actual physical conduct you'd have to engage in. You ought to go to the protect.org website. You'll see some things that'll shock you. A judge telling a defendant who molested a 9-year-old girl, well, it takes two to tango. A judge who, in a case involving a 5-year-old boy, said the boy was seductive in awarding probation to the offender. Well, look, how do you think you get to be a judge? I mean, think about it for a minute. Or, for that matter, a district attorney. I mean, you elect these guys, but there's no opposing candidate. Tell me who ran against Morgenthau in the last election. Go ahead. Of course you can't. These aren't real elections, is what I'm saying. How do you even judge a district attorney? Let me ask you that. when you judge a district attorney, when the press judges a district attorney, how do you think they do it? Conviction rate. Of course they do it by conviction rate. So how do you get the best possible conviction rate? You duck all the cases that are tough. I mean, I could get 100% conviction rate if I simply said, okay, let's see, you shot 3 people, stabbed 6 people, and raped 7 people. I'll give you 3 years. Who's not going to take it? I mean, they don't call them plea bargains, for nothing. But nobody actually looks into this. Nobody has like a consumeristic attitude towards law enforcement. You just wait for the press to report an atrocity, and then you scream and yell. Robert Chambers, right, was just in the news, right? Okay. What do you think actually happened in that case? I mean, everybody's beating their chest now saying it's so terrible he's getting out. What do you think actually happened in that case? Do you remember the case? So what do you think he was convicted of? Yeah, and he pleaded to manslaughter. And you know what he got for that plea? He got a whole bunch of burglaries that they had him dead to right on thrown in, and a whole bunch of drug charges thrown in. He got a free murder as far as I'm concerned. He got it free. Now, why did he get the deal? Why did he get that deal? They tried the case and the jury hung. So the second time around, not taking any chances. And he got the deal. By me, I don't believe for a second that this was, because the victim's family wanted it. I mean, they may have, but what do I care? The case said the people of the state of New York against Robert Chambers. It didn't say, Jennifer's mother against Robert Chambers. I don't even see why she got to make that choice. But this happens all the time is what I'm saying. When you see people pleading, they're getting the kitchen sink thrown in. And it's the deal you wanted because these are people that you vote for. They had the Conference of Catholic Bishops. They said at the time, and they were correct, the law does not require us to report. Who's a social worker here? A nurse, a cop. Okay. There are people who are mandated reporters by law. Okay? This means if you are suspicious of child abuse, you're required, teachers, you're required to report. Clergy were not required to report. And they said that. We're not required to report. So they didn't break any laws.
Doesn't God say they should report it?
Apparently there's a lot of flexibility around God. And clearly there must be, because there are apparently some people's gods that say, go kill other people, right? So I don't know. I don't speak for, we don't have that kind of relationship. But they didn't break any laws. They came back with a report that said there's been this grotesque cover-up. There's been absolute enabling of pedophiles. They didn't indict anybody. No crime was committed. Now, a lot of states, I wrote an article about this that was on the cover of Parade magazine, the difference between sick and evil. A lot of states have subsequently passed laws making clergy mandated reporting. The district attorney in Nassau County is opposed to that law. Yeah, he's opposed to that law. What distinguished the Catholic Church from all, and I've had lawsuits against the Jehovah's Witnesses, against Jewish congregations, against Baptists, nothing unique about Catholics. Because, lions go where there's antelopes. Predatory pedophiles go where there's victims, where you have power and access. What was unique about them is the recycling. And the recycling consists of you take somebody, no question that he molested children, you send them for your own in-house therapy, you decide he's cured, then you introduce him to another parish without disclosing to that parish the person's background. That's where the wheels came off their morality. They didn't disclose. They still haven't committed to disclosure. They're talking about one strike depending on the severity and blah, 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 blah. The church even came up with this new term. The perpetrators are not pedophiles. They're epivophiles. What does that mean? Well, don't ask me, because no scientific group has ever recognized the term, but what it means to them is homosexuals. And their position is that it's these seductive boys that brought out the latent homosexuality in these poor, innocent priests. That's their position. That's been their position right along. So, they take and blame the victim to absolutely new heights. And it's not hard to blame the victim because child sexual abuse is a crime that very often induces guilt in the victim over and over again. I can't tell you how many kids I've represented who find a way to blame themselves.